Joining us now on that note is our good friend Uncle B, Blaine Fowler, national champion at BYU, dual threat analyst for us on BYUtv. Blaine, let's start with the game against Arizona. One to remember for sure for a number of reasons, but what would your headline be after that game against Arizona now on a Tuesday?
To me, it was about defense, and so some type of a headline about defense. If I was surprised about anything, I thought through fall camp that they were going to be very solid defensively. They were even better than I anticipated defensively. They were really good. And what people have to remember is this is a very skilled Arizona team offensively. They had a lot of pieces back, and they have a reputation of being very good in the Pac-12 offensively. They've been suspect defensively over the years. But since Rich Rodriguez has been there, year after year after year, they come out with schemes and with talent offensively to move the football, and especially to run the football. And so the fact that up until that 48-yard, or what was it, that last run, 48 or 49 yards,
49.
up until that last run, they were hovering around 50 yards rushing in that game. So as confident as I was in that defense coming into this game, I was still surprised at how good they were defensively. They played lights out on defense in this ball game.
And it helped that they forced a couple of turnovers, which brings us to today's stat of the day.
It's the BYU Sports Nation stat of the day.
Yeah, BYU's negative 14 in turnover margin during the 5-game losing streak to Utah. So against Arizona, BYU was +2, which was great. But the story of the Utah game, and we still want to break down Arizona a little bit, but has been BYU just turns the ball over a ton.
Yeah, and they haven't forced a lot of turnovers. Utah has been really, really good at taking care of the football, and BYU has struggled, especially early in games. So the tone of the game gets set early on with turnovers. And you reflect back on last year's bowl game. I've never seen anything like that ever. And I've played a long time, and I've broadcast a long time, right?
Wild.
I have never seen anything like that.
It had never happened in college football. 5 turnovers on the first 5 possessions, all resulting in touchdowns. That had never happened in a college football game.
And in this streak against Utah, there have been seasons when I go in and I'm looking player-for-player matchups against Utah going, oh, you know what? BYU's actually has more talent this year. They're better this year. And they've lost some of those games, and it's been because of turnovers. When you average over a 5-year period minus 2.8 in turnover margin, you're going to lose even if you have marginally better talent that particular year. And so that's a big stat. It was a big stat against Arizona. Arizona, when they seemed like they had some things going, BYU would force a turnover. And BYU never shot themselves in the foot, short-circuiting drives with turnovers. They had a couple of penalties that cost them points.
Yes.
And I think those are things that you can clean up. Costly penalties that BYU, if they're clean on a penalty perspective, probably closer to 28 points in that game. So that cost them. But the fact that they didn't turn it over and give Arizona any momentum is a very good sign. And you know what? Think about the personnel. You got a quarterback that is very experienced, and you're playing in a lower risk offense than you've been playing at in years past. And you got a tailback that just by reputation, historically, just doesn't turn it over. Jamal Williams he understands ball security. He's always got that ball high and tight. He always protects that ball. Very strong player. He looked unbelievably physical in this ball game. And easier throws, not high risk throws. This is a defense or an offense that is designed to take what the defense gives. And so in this particular game, Arizona was going to let BYU push them around up front and short underneath throws. That's what BYU did.
Blaine Fowler with us on BYU Sports Nation, breaking down the Arizona-BYU game and now looking forward to the rivalry showdown between the Utes and the Cougars. A concern that I've heard brought up by a few people, including the coaching staff at BYU, is you can dominate a game statistically, but you have to capitalize in the red zone. How does BYU shore up their red zone offense and get a few more points on the board?
I'm not that concerned with it because I do think some of those penalties hurt them when they had opportunities to go deep into the red zone. I didn't think they got into the red zone enough. Their red zone efficiency wasn't awful, and so I think it will get better, but I think they need to have more opportunities in the red zone, and that will come as they become more familiar with this offense. And there are going to be games which are more defensive-oriented. That was this one. BYU knew that Arizona is very explosive offensively, and they're a rhythm offense. So the idea was if BYU could manhandle them up front, which they thought they could, and then we saw, yes, they did, that they could keep the football away from this Arizona offense. And because this is a rhythm offense, when they're sitting over there for 5 and 6 minutes, they come out and it's like they're starting all over again. That was the game plan this week. That won't always be the game plan. Utah is not going to be as easy to manhandle up front as Arizona was. Utah, I think BYU is going to have to throw more intermediate passes and those kinds of things. I think at linebacker, they're having to reload at linebacker where they were really good there last year with Norris and Paul and Whittingham. And so I think that's an area where BYU probably wants to attack more. The back end is pretty good for Utah, so expect some more intermediate. They're going to have to throw it a little bit more. And Utah's offense isn't quite like Arizona's in terms of explosiveness. At least they haven't shown that yet. So BYU maybe doesn't have to try to take the air out of the ball quite as much. So a different game plan may lead to more points.
Utah, it seems like, will nickel and dime things kind of like BYU was nickel and diming things against Arizona.
Yeah, and Utah's a little different in that Arizona has a very, very veteran quarterback in Anu Solomon that understands what he wants to get done. And when Anu scrambles around, he's just scrambling around to find a receiver downfield. When you watch Troy Williams in that first game, Troy Williams is running around, and he's likely to just tuck it and go. And so BYU's got to be a little more careful with him. And he's not maybe quite as dangerous at running around and then all of a sudden finding a receiver 50 yards behind the defense after a scramble. So a little different preparation than they had. But Troy Williams is going to see a pass rush this week. I thought Southern Utah was very effective in getting after him, and he escaped a number of times and made plays. BYU is significantly better from a talent perspective in the front seven than Southern Utah. So Utah has a big challenge trying to keep that front off of Troy Williams this week.
My biggest question mark in watching that BYU or Southern Utah game was Utah's offensive line. To me, that's the matchup BYU can exploit somewhat in the rush defense and even pass defense game. Do you see that as a matchup BYU can win?
After one game, I was surprised with that because Utah had 4 returning starters coming back. But when you've got a big-time NFL tailback behind a line and can pound the ball like they did last year, maybe that line was good but not great last year. And then they replaced the left tackle with a JC transfer. In fact, one that BYU
was committed, Garrett Bowles, to BYU.
And so it's just interesting that they struggled a bit. Now, the advantage Utah has is that BYU's defense is very similar to what Southern Utah ran last week because of the Ed Lamb influence. And so they're feeling like, oh, now we will get this thing dialed in and we won't have as many breakdowns this week. But there's enough wrinkles that are different that I think there's still going to be a challenge. But and the talent level with Harvey Longy coming off the edge, the big guys they have inside. I mean, BYU is significantly more physical and significantly faster in the front seven than Southern Utah. So I agree with you, Jeremy. I think that's what I'm looking at. I don't understand why Utah wasn't better last week because based on experience, they should have been, but they certainly look suspect up front. And if they were, BYU's way better on the front seven.
It's such a chess match, and you have to wonder how much did BYU show against Arizona and how much did Utah really show against Southern Utah, because you don't want to give everything away for obvious reasons. And Kyle Whittingham has been tabbed as a guy that is a master at revealing and unveiling things in the biggest of games. So how do you see it from that perspective?
Yeah, we're going to see new things from both teams that we didn't see last week. And again, BYU's offense, this offense is an offense where Ty Detmer is going to take a look at what Utah has done over the years and what they did last week and tailor a game plan that's very specific to attack the weaknesses of that defense. And the weaknesses are different than Arizona's. So we'll see a very different game plan. That's the beauty of this kind of offense. People were saying to me, man, that was boring.
It was beautiful.
And they ran the ball. And I'm going, do you forget the time? Because Norm Chow had that same philosophy, that BYU went up to Utah and just handed the ball to Ronnie Jenkins
and
Brian McKenzie for 9 bazillion yards. I know I tell you guys a million times not to exaggerate, but 9 bazillion times they just handed it off. And people were saying to me, that was so boring. Sark only threw the ball 12. He only had 12 attempts in that game. And I go, yeah, wasn't that beautiful?
70 yards passing.
But they dominated the line of scrimmage, and that's what the Utah defense chose to give in that game. And Norm Chow said, if this is what you're going to give, then we will take what you're giving and dominate the line of scrimmage. Ty has that same mentality. It's an NFL mentality. What does the defense do? How do we attack it? Some games it's going to be run heavy. Some games it's going to be pass heavy. I think this week, a little more balance and a little more intermediate passing just by virtue of what Utah runs defensively.
We shouldn't be that surprised that BYU attacked Arizona on the ground because they had a significant advantage in the trenches, right? And
Right.
you have an elite running back.
Yeah, and they're still going to go to that because they need to establish the run, and Ty's going to be about balance offensively. But Utah's front is better than Arizona's front.
No question.
And so you've got to run to keep that front, honest defensively. But I would expect a little more intermediate passing game off of play action. Establish that run with Jamal Williams, play action pass, and throw those in between the safeties and the D-line where those linebackers roam. Make the backers step up and defend run because BYU was so effective running it this week. And then you're going to leave a bigger open area in that middle to throw the football. And I would expect that's where BYU will try to attack early in this game.
And I expect BYU to have more of the playbook open. Taysom Hill talked about that yesterday where, we haven't cut into that very far, so you'll see it expand. And the take on boring is just from an entertainment standpoint, right? But this rivalry has always been entertaining. And our Twitter question today, Blaine, is this. How has the tone of the rivalry changed with Kalani Sitake as BYU's head coach?
Yeah, I actually like the way Kalani's approached this. And I think the way Kalani approaches it has taken a psychological weapon away from Kyle Whittingham. Because in the past, Kyle Whittingham has been able to play on, hey, Bronco Mendenhall doesn't even respect you. He doesn't respect you. He's gotten his teams to come in and play with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Not a hatred toward BYU, but they don't respect you. Is it any secret that Bronco and Kyle didn't really like each other that much? I mean, and that kind of carried over. I think Utah took more advantage of that than BYU did. So now what is Utah going to do for that edge? Those kids aren't going to hate Kalani. They love Kalani. Kalani's talking about how much he loves everybody up there and how much he respects that great program and how fun this rivalry is going to be and how he and Kyle are going to hug after the game. How are you going to turn that into a psychological edge now and get your fight? Hey, we don't like this guy. Oh, wait a minute. We do. Hey, these guys don't respect you. Oh, wait a minute. They do.
Oh, wait. Kalani Sitake recruited almost every one of you on defense.
And so it takes away a little bit there. And Kalani told the players over the last couple of days, and he alluded to this in his coach's show yesterday, that he told them that hate for the opponent, and so if you go in there just crazy with hate, first of all, you're not going to execute, and the passion from that may carry you through a half a quarter, maybe a quarter. And then that fades as you get into the routine of the game. He says, if you go in there with a love for each other, and so you're playing for each other, you're playing because you love your teammates and you love this program and you want to represent your family and your teammates and these fans, that kind of passion can carry you not only for 4 quarters but for a whole season. So he's telling these guys, let's not focus on the hate. Let's focus on how much we love playing with each other. Let's be passionate about that. That's the kind of team that goes in and doesn't turn the ball over 5 times in the first quarter.
I love that perspective that
Wow.
he takes, but I also love the fact that he's not tabbing this game as just another game.
Well, you think about the pressure this week. Who's it on? If
Utah.
if Utah loses this game,
They're supposed to win.
if they lose this game, then for BYU, it's like, well, this is Kalani's first year. He's going to upgrade the recruiting. This is just the first step. They looked fine. Here's some things they're going to fix, and this is the start of a new era.
It was in Salt
okay.
Lake City.
Right. If BYU wins this game, then it's oh my goodness, was it schemes? What was it? Look at Kalani, knew how to prepare these. He turned the corner in his first year, not even with all the kids that he recruited. And so for Utah, I think the pressure is squarely on them. This is a must-win football game for Utah. It is not a must-win for BYU.
Fantastic stuff. Blaine Fowler is on After Further Review tonight. 7 Eastern, 5 Mountain Time, brand new episode breaking down the Arizona game, looking forward to the Utes and Cougars. I imagine there will be some more projections involved.
Oh, we got lots of fun stuff to talk about today.
Great stuff today.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Blaine.
Thanks, guys.